So you've planted some trees to improve habitat. Now what? The odds of them surviving can be measured by what kind of trees you planted, the new environment that you planted them in, as well as the amount of time, effort, care, and money you invest into their maintenance. Let's face it, you already have some time, effort, and likely some money invested into these young trees getting their roots relocated. Turning your back on them at this point would be like parents turning their back on a young child. A tree farmer's job is a whole lot easier, but like a child, if a young tree gets some TLC in the early years, the odds of that seedling living up to the planter's expectations increases significantly. The younger the tree or seedling you're planting, the more TLC it will require in order to simply survive those first few years. There are a lot of things in nature just trying to survive. Your young new tree is just one more living thing joining the fight. It's in a competition now, and you can significantly improve its odds at winning. I'm starting this video assuming you have already planted some seedlings. However, if you are still in the planning stages of planting those trees, I want to backtrack just a bit and encourage you to do some homework on matching the soil and other environmental conditions where you are looking to plant the tree with the tree variety that likes or at least can tolerate those conditions. There are good resources on the internet to help with this. For example, you don't want to plant a tree that doesn't like wet feet into a marshy area, or a tree that needs full sun under a full canopy of mature maple trees. Alright, you have a seedling planted that likes where it's planted. Now let's improve its odds of becoming a powerhouse of a living organism. I have a friend that I deer hunt with occasionally that says all he wants in life is an unfair advantage. We all like to do what's fair, but after a few decades of planting trees, I have really grown to simply want my trees to have an unfair advantage, especially in the early years. If you are like me, you may have planted a bunch of seedlings to encourage nature to spend more time in the area. Yet it's nature spending more time in the area that can cause some of the most damage to your plantings. In this video, I am going to outline a few of my tree experiences. Your experiences may be totally different due to the many factors that come into play, but hopefully seeing some of my experiences will help somebody grow a better tree. God wired me with a passion to plant trees at an early age. I started out with what I call now hope and prayer plantings. Order some seedlings and then stick them in the ground and hope and pray you can someday hang a tree stand in one. I killed a lot of trees in that first decade of tree planting. I love big old oak trees. There's just something majestic and powerful about a big old oak. I would order oak tree seedlings, run out to the woods, and then randomly stick them in the ground, and then stick a wired orange flag next to them. After a few years, I began calling those orange flags grave markers. 30 years later, I still run across those markers once in a while shed hunting in the spring. I slowly learned that most, if not all, little oaks love and need the sun. And most, if not all, deer love to eat little oaks. After a few more years of mostly learning from my mistakes, I started getting more serious about my tree plantings. My dad and I noticed we had an expanding pocket of soft maple trees in the woods about the size of an acre, with only a few valuable trees in the mix. We took on the job of cutting down and burning all the soft maple trees, a rather large project we tackled on the weekends throughout the winter. By spring we were ready to plant. With some guidance from our forester, we stuck 500 plus seedlings into this acre-sized pocket in the woods. Mom, Dad, and I had a lot of work stuck into this project, and we did not want it to turn into a food plot for the deer. So we started to research different methods of tree protection. We ended up buying some 7.5 foot tall plastic deer fencing and fenced in the entire area. Having a fence in the woods is a job in and of itself, but we kept that fence up for 9 years. We also mowed around the trees with my dad's lawnmower for the first 4 or 5 years. The survival rate of this tree project was incredibly high, but there was also a lot of blood, sweat, and tears poured into the project. This project stands on its own now and has now gone through its 13th growing season. A few years later, we did a much smaller second planting in the woods, this time with white cedar. Both can be seen here. In the fall of 2008, I had access to another small parcel of land, and the following spring began planting seedlings. According to my tree orders and Tree Geeky color-coded spreadsheets, we have planted 2,741 trees and shrubs on this land over the past 7 springs. Weather can kill, or as seen in tree rings from a cut tree stump, It is the difference between good annual growth and bad. Farmers have grown to really appreciate normal weather. 2 of the 7 growing seasons were ridiculous extremes on this property. One of the worst droughts I can remember in my lifetime, and another year where we were mowing lawn in March when the trees put on some early growth only to have a late freeze kill it off. With the drought, we went out and we bought 3 150-foot garden hoses, and we began snaking them around the property, doing our best to save lives. We couldn't water them all, and we focused on the 1 and 2 year old transplants and those seedlings from the spring that we had extra work stuck into, such as tube trees. We ended up losing most of our seedlings we planted that spring. There's only so much you can do about the weather. However, there are other risk factors that affect a young tree's health that we can help mitigate. Let's talk about vegetation first. Grasses, weeds, vines, other trees, and other vegetation can quickly kill a seedling or severely slow its growth rate. Grasses, weeds, small brush, or competing trees can just be mowed or bush hogged. For grasses and weeds you can't reach with a mower, I have used glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, along with some kind of a shielding mechanism to very carefully spray around the young seedlings. This works really well, but it is time intensive and risky due to potential wind drift and other accidental applications to unintended targets. About 5 years ago, I began using the Doubletree herbicide mix. More information about larger applications of this mix can be found on the Outreach Outdoor forums. My version of the application is done by combining 16 ounces of Prowl, 16 ounces of Semazine, 8 ounces of crop oil, and 3 ounces of Clethodim, and then adding a gallon of water in a hand sprayer. I actually put some water in the bottom of the sprayer first, as some of the herbicides are thick and can cause the intake tube to clog. This can be an over-the-top application mix for many varieties of trees when applied in the spring before bud break or candling in conifers begins. I have sprayed early spring in the 5 years I have used this mix, beginning as grasses just begin greening up. I do a quick spraying around the base of each tree, which nicely turns the ground a yellow color to mark the ones you have sprayed. Do your homework on how big of a circle you want to spray. Some shade from weeds in a dry year can be good, and also erosion can be an issue if the circles are too big. A few of the weed varieties I deal with survive the application, and I am looking to spray the mix a little bit later this spring in an effort to better control those weeds with the post-emergent side of the mix. Because I am hand spraying and I just tend to be overly cautious, I have never done a complete over-the-top spraying, and I have never sprayed on freshly planted seedlings, as you want the ground to completely seal around the roots of fresh plantings. Many shrubs do not like this mix at all and should be avoided. I carefully sprayed around a couple of lilac bushes, and it did not kill them, but it did cost them a year's growth. I know a tree farmer that has sprayed Gly or Roundup over the top of his spruce trees in the fall. It has done a great job of weed control without damaging the trees. Timing on these applications can be crucial. As with any chemicals you are spraying, do your homework. The Outreach Outdoor Forums contains a ton of information and has many forum members with knowledge and experiences to share. Coming soon in part 2 of this video, where we will cover several more ways to give your seedlings an unfair advantage in life, we'll discuss techniques that will have you remaining calm even if you see these tree wreckers running towards your tree planting. Watch for its release.